black. He's been the loudest anti-black candidate on the GOP side. I can go through a slew of things of what this dude said. He said racism don't exist, blah, blah, blah. He said a lot of stuff, okay? But he's very much anti-black. They're all kind of taking on this whole anti-blackness just to, I don't know if they believe it or they're just doing it to get seen or to get some type of recognition or whatever. I don't know. But all of them are kind of doing it. So you have Vivek over there. He's just being straight anti-black and racist. And then you have DeSantis, the governor of Florida. This the man who pretty much looks like he's trying to turn book banning by black authors into a sport and throwing away any kind of diversity, equity, inclusion. He's just throwing all that shit out the window. So America isn't racist, but let's ban all of the black authors, right? And then let's get rid of diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Straight out of the segregationist playbook. This is the Southern strategy. It's like he's on a mission to erase the very voice and stories that challenge his non-racist American narrative. Ron DeSantis is also, I believe his descendants are from Cuba, so they would flip on him in a second. They flipped on Vivek. They actually just really don't like DeSantis. Like he'll never be president, but he's one of the more dangerous ones because he's a governor. And so he's enacting policies that backs up the rhetoric. You can espouse racist talking points all day long, and it may have some effect on us. It influences other people to be racist and all of that. But when you have the institution backing it, meaning you have the power to enact the laws to back your racism, well, then that's when it actually affects our lives. That's the whole thing Nikki Haley was completely delusioned about, because you could say that it wasn't a racist country, but it damn sure embraced racism in all its policies and institutions. So because she's saying that his country was never racist, and then she said the intent, their intent was to do this, and this. No, it wasn't. Let's take a blast from the racist past. Let me read you a few racist quotes from America's political leaders and presidents from different eras. I think I can answer that question about America's racism with just a few quotes. John C. Calhoun, he was a supporter of slavery, but this is what he said: "I hold that in the present state of civilization, where two races of different origin and distinguished by color and other physical differences as well as intellectual are brought together, the relation now existing in the slaveholding states between the two is, instead of an evil, a good, a positive good." That was John C. Calhoun. He was the vice president. Let's see, here's another. Andrew Johnson, this was the biggest racist. This was the 17th president of the United States right after the ending of the Civil War and after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. He took over. This is Andrew Johnson. He said, "This is a country for white men, and by God, as long as I am president, it shall be a government for white men." Okay. Here's another one. Thomas Jefferson, 1785. "I advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites in the endowment both of body and mind." Ronald Reagan said, this was in, I think, 1971. He referred to African delegates to the United States as monkeys who are still uncomfortable wearing shoes. Harry Truman in 1911 said, and this was in a letter he wrote, "I think one man is just as good as another so long as he's honest and decent and not a nigger or a Chinaman." That was in 1911. This is Lyndon B. Johnson. LBJ, of course, he's the one that signed the Civil Rights Act, the series of Civil Rights Act. He said, I'll have those niggers voting Democrat for the next 200 years. He also said, these Negroes, they're getting pretty uppity these days, and that's the problem for us since they've got something now they never had before. The political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we got to do something about this, and we've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down. Not enough to make a difference. Richard Nixon said, there has never in history been an adequate black nation, and they are the only race of which this is true. That was Richard Nixon. This is Theodore Roosevelt, even though he invited Booker T. Washington to eat a meal at the White House. He had something else to say in a letter he wrote to Owen Wister in 1901. He said, I entirely agree with you that as a race and in the mass, African Americans are altogether inferior to the whites. He also said, I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are dead Indians, but I believe 9 out of every 10 are. That was Theodore Roosevelt. These are presidents, by the way. This is Warren Harding. He said in 1921 at a speech in Birmingham, he advocated for political equity for African Americans, but he also supported segregation. He said, I want to see the time when black men will regard themselves as full participants in the benefits and duties of American citizenship. But whether they like it or not, amalgamation of the races is not going to be tolerated. That was in 1921. He was not a president. I believe he was a candidate running. This was George Wallace, governor of Alabama in 1963. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. I'm sure everybody remember that one. Theodore Bilbo, a senator from Mississippi, said every man and woman who favors white supremacy and Negro segregation and who believes in preserving the purity of the race should join the white supremacy poll tax club today. Strom Thurmond, U.S. Senator from South Carolina. This is the state where Nikki Haley is. 1948, he was running for president, and he said, all the laws of Washington and all the bayonets of the army cannot force the Negro into our homes, our schools, our churches. That was in 1948. Bill Tillman, U.S. Senator from South Carolina, said, we have done our level best to prevent blacks from voting. We have scratched our heads to find out how we could eliminate the last one of them. We stuffed ballot boxes, we shot them. We are not ashamed of it. He was the senator from 1895 to 1918, senator of South Carolina. This is now Lexter Maddox. This is the governor of Georgia. He said, I am trying to maintain segregation in this restaurant, and I'm going to do it. Now, what was happening in Georgia, they were trying to stage a protest, and he wielded an axe to prevent African Americans from entering the restaurant. And while doing so, he said, I'm trying to maintain segregation in this restaurant, and I'm going to do it. Bull Connor. We know who Bull Connor is, right? That's the guy from Bloody Sunday. He said, you can never whip these birds if you don't keep you and them separate. I found that out in Birmingham. You've got to keep your white and black separate. That's not the words he said. Orville Faubus. This is the governor of Arkansas, and he was the one that called the National Guard out to prevent African Americans from entering school in 1957. That was of the Little Rock Central High, the Little Rock 9. He said, blood will run in the streets if Negro pupils should attempt to enter Central High School. That's what he said in 1957. There's more. Jesse Helms, U.S. Senator from North Carolina, he said, the Negro cannot count forever on the kind of restraint that's thus far left him free to clog the streets, disrupt traffic, and interfere with other men's rights. Ross Burnett, governor of Mississippi, 1962. There was a crisis at the University of Mississippi. Barnett said, there is no case in history where the Caucasian race has survived social integration. We will not drink from the cup of genocide. Barnett is the one that opposed James Meredith from enrolling in a University of Mississippi. Eisenhower, at a White House dinner, I think this was before Brown v. Board, but he said to Chief Justice Earl Warren of the Supreme Court, Dwight Eisenhower, the 34th president, said, their little sweet girls are not required to sit in school alongside some big black buck. When he said they, he's talking about white Southerners. He told Chief Justice Earl that he understood why white Southerners wanted to make sure their sweet little girls are not required to sit in school alongside some big black buck. Yes, he said that. So Woodrow Wilson, that's the president who played the racist film Birth of a Nation. He segregated the federal workforce after it had been integrated for decades. So he came in and segregated. We know Andrew Jackson, he was known for the Indian Removal Act, which led to the Trail of Tears, killing off a bunch of Native Americans. Andrew Jackson was also racist, but not, there is no but. Andrew Jackson was always racist. He sought out the help of the black militia during the War of 1812. I believe that was the right one, the War of 1812. He said he couldn't rely on the white soldiers. They were too weak. So he set out to get the black militia that was successful in all other wars. He utilized them to win the War of 1812. Yeah, racist and all. He knew it. This is just some of the proof that America is, quote unquote, not a racist country or never been a racist country. Oh, wait a minute. There's one that I forgot because they called him the Great Emancipator. The Great Emancipator. What's his name? Man, one who was assassinated. Lincoln. That's him. Yeah, they call him the Great Emancipator, but this is what he had to say about black people. Here it is, the Great Emancipator. He said, I am not, nor ever have been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. Yeah, so that was Abraham Lincoln's direct quote on racism. That was Abraham Lincoln racist quote. And there has been several presidents who have made racist remarks. They've campaigned on racism. There's a lot more. I just shaved it down to like under 30. That could have been about maybe 25 quotes from different elected officials. So all of those that I said were elected officials, meaning they had power and control over what the laws were in the country, right? So that's the biggest thing. Can they be racist and just be in their racism, or can they be racist and also make my life a living hell with their racism? What can they do to me because of their racism? Well, if they're an elected official, they can enact racist policies that will directly affect you. So here's a few. Slavery, of course. It just didn't stop at slavery, but let's just, at a minimum, let's say slavery. During enslavement and also after enslavement, there were several laws that were passed aside from black codes, because there were black codes that were passed right after the Civil War, but there were laws that were passed specifically against black people having the right to bear arms. Mind you, the Constitution is already in place